and welcome to the third month of Watercolor Journal Club. This month we are focusing on style development and technique. So I wanted to start the month out showing you some techniques. Right here I'm showing you how to put in a flat wash on dry paper. It's a very basic technique and you just want to keep moving while it's wet and then leave it alone. Here I'm showing you how to do a graduated wash or a gradated wash where it's dark to light, or you could do light to dark, and how you do that. It's on dry paper, so you'll just put the paint down and then you will rinse out your brush and add water, just water, and the paint will slowly graduate in value going down the page. And I couldn't tilt this while videoing, but if you tilt it, it helps it move. Now I'm showing you a wet and wet technique, so you'll use that a lot as well, wet and wet techniques. Now this is just a wet and wet flat wash, which I think is easier than on dry paper. I'm using mixed media paper, so it comes out streaky. Usually this will come out really nice and smooth, but I just wanted to use my practice paper for these techniques, so let's show you that. And then I'm going to do the next one's going to be a wet and wet gradated wash or graduated, so it'll go again from dark to light, or you can do light to dark. So I'm wetting the paper and then putting in the color and then just really letting it be. You can grab some of those. I'm grabbing some of that. If it starts to clump up anywhere, you can grab that excess water so that it doesn't blossom or anything there. And then I'm going to practice some splattering. You can do this a lot of ways. You can just make sure you have enough. The trick to it is enough water and paint on your brush. You can do it this way. You can use a toothbrush and flick it with your finger. You can use your brush and flick it with your finger too. You can actually flick the bristles. You'll see me do that in a minute. Or you can just, as you saw, tap, 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 and you kind of go far down the handle and you tap. And you can get different kinds of spray. So when you use your thumb or your finger and move the bristles, you get a much finer spray. You see that, and they're hard to see, but they're little tiny ones. And when you do it that way, you can do that with a toothbrush. If it's a firmer bristle, it'll really splatter a lot. If it's a softer bristle, it will be less. And then if you tap with your finger, you'll get the bigger and smaller. You get variation. So it just depends what you want. And then over here, I'm just showing you, so you can throw your watercolor down, just real fun like that, and then you could use the back of your brush to scrape in and see it makes a groove in the paper so the paint collects in there. And so if you do that while it's wet, the paint will collect in there and get a little darker. So that's good for grasses, branches, things like that. You could also use a knife. You can use your fingernail. People use their fingernails. So that's another technique, scraping. And then here's some more splatter and dropping color in. So as long as the paint is wet, you can go back in. So it's a timing thing with watercolor quite a bit too, and an amount of water thing. So if you go in with more paint and it's still wet, you'll be okay. But if you go in with more water and it's not that wet, you're going to get blossoms and things. And we'll talk about that later. I'll show you more with that, but these are some good things to practice. I wanted to show you some real basic techniques that you'll use over and over again. So the washes, painting on a dry paper is very common, and painting into wet areas is also common. So wherever water is, the colors are going to move there. And so when you paint wet and wet, it's a little harder to control, but not really in a way if you just make sure you put the water where you want it to be. And when you're dropping in those colors, if you're familiar with your colors and the way your paint reacts and how much paint you have on your brush and how much water, you'll be fine. So those are things to pay attention to. You can have a lot of fun with all these techniques. And there's a quick review of the name of each technique that we tried. Now on the next page, we're going to try some more fun things, and you can experiment and make up techniques too. So here I'm just showing how you could throw down a value, like a medium to light value, and then you can come in with more paint while that's wet and drop that in and get some variation in value. You can also drop in another color in there as well while that's wet, and it'll act differently than if you glaze over when it's dry. So again, keeping in mind how much paint you have on your brush, you do not want a whole bunch of water on your brush at this point because you don't have a whole bunch of water on the paper. So dropping in more pigment than anything at this point. And just knowing that and then knowing to leave it alone and moving on. You can then use a sponge or a paper towel and dip it in your paint and blot it onto the paper. This is good for like bushes, any textures you want, even flowers. I kind of thought this ended up looking like flowers in the end, and then I went and I sprayed it with water bottle. And that's another fun thing to do is you can spray your paper with the water bottle before you paint or after, and then scraping. So I thought this ended up looking kind of abstract flower, floral type thing. So that was fun. Just playing around and trying different things is a lot of fun with watercolor. So you can make yourself these little boxes and try different things to see what happens. You can experiment with your colors and how they act and things. Now I'm drying out my brush. You saw me dab it on my paper towel, and I'm going straight into the paint. And you see how it skips? And this paper isn't even that textured, but it skips when you have a dry brush. That is great for bark, fences, so bark on a tree, fences, things like that. So that's dry brush. So I didn't have very much water in my brush at all. You saw me squeeze it out of my paper towel and then just go straight to the paint and put it on the paper. And that's what happened there when you do that. Over here, just showing you can lay down, again, a bunch of color, and you can drop more color in. You can let that dry. You can go over it with another color, which is called glazing. You could drop water in and create blossoms. You can lift out. So while it's wet, you can lift out, and also when it's dry, you can lift out. So you can take a paper towel and lift out, and you see how that's fairly subtle. You can take your damp brush in there and then lift out, and you see that's much more defined. You could also let this dry and lift out as well. So on your watercolor tube, you can see if the paint is a staining paint. If it's a staining paint, if it's very staining, it's harder to lift out. It's going to really get into the fiber of the paper. But if it's not, they're easy to lift. You can lift staining colors, but you'll never get back to white typically. So that's something to keep in mind too. A lot of reds, I think a lot of the cadmiums are fairly staining, and the phthalos are fairly staining. So just something to keep in mind there. And then over here, I wanted to show you some other techniques where you can drop colors in and they mix on the paper instead of mixing them on your palette. You can also flick some water in there while it's still wet. You let it dry a little bit, but it stays pretty wet. And when you do that, look what happens. It's fun. It moves the pigment. The water displaces the pigment, and you get nice texture there. Then here, you can go in to the painted area. You could soften edges to go in with a damp brush. So you have some hard edges there and soft edges. Soft edges are like when we did the gradated wash or the graduated wash. We're basically softening that edge. We didn't let it just stop with a bold color. We added water so it fades out, and that's a softened edge. A hard edge is like in that pink area up in the left corner. There's a very distinct line. That's a hard edge, and you do want those, and you do want soft edges too. So you can add those. And over here I want to show you how to glaze over color. So once it's dry, you can take another color and go over that, and that's going to be different than if you mix the two colors together. So if you mix the two colors together, you'd have kind of a purpley. This way you actually see the two colors, and you know, since watercolor is translucent, most colors are very translucent, you can do that. Over here, if it's still wet and you do color, and it'll mix on the paper a little bit. Where it's dry, it will be glazing, so you'll be glazing over. There I softened an edge. I just came in with a damp brush and I grabbed that bottom of that pigment and it softens it out. You still have the nice hard edge up at the top left corner where that pink stripe is. That's a hard edge, so you can leave that. You could soften it by going in with a damp brush again and lifting out a little bit of color. So even when it dries, you can typically soften as long as the color will come up, which it typically will, especially if you're using good paper and things. So These are all really fun techniques to try. So have lots of fun practicing these, and there'll be more for you throughout the month. If you're new to Watercolor Journal Club, you can head over to my Instagram account, and the prompt lists are there. I also have a video on creating your own watercolor journal, and this month you can count on a bunch of videos about technique and style, and I will do some nature journaling as well as some of the projects with style and technique. So lots to look forward to this month. Every entry that you post, every prompt that you do is entered. If you post on Instagram, it's entered to win a watercolor journal. I give away one a month. And we just have lots of fun. It's a fun community, and you learn lots about watercolor, and we have a lot of fun painting. So love to have you join us. We use the hashtag Watercolor Journal Club. You can tag me, ChristyDrainac.art, over there, and hope to see you there. If you're going to participate, would love to hear from you in the comments. And if you'd like this video and subscribe, that would be awesome. I post weekly and sometimes bi-weekly. So hope to see you creating lots of fun art, and happy painting. Talk to you later. Thanks for stopping by.